Been a pleasure.
They hurt people. That's all you need to know. The police.
See what's at the market before I decide on a dish.
Which do you think is faster? This boat or the Regalia?
Obviously the Regalia.
Would be nice if this boat were just as fast, though.
We could always remodel the Regalia so it could drive on both land and sea. Best of both worlds.
Hang on tight.
It's a board. It's a roof board. Under his feet. You pull that up and you can put things through there. The jail to bring a couple of these.
An initial assessment, which was produced by U.S. Central Command and by the Defense Intelligence Agency, says that the initial assessment is that while there was significant damage to the 3 nuclear facilities that were targeted by the United States over the weekend, it only set back the nuclear program by several months, and that Iran's enriched uranium, what they had already produced prior to those attacks this weekend, remains untouched and was not destroyed, and that the centrifuges that produce are used to enrich uranium are also largely intact. So these findings, obviously at odds with the comments that we've heard from President Trump and from Defense Secretary Hegseth, who both said that Iran's nuclear program was obliterated. And we got comment, we reached the Pentagon for comment. We received a statement provided to us on behalf of Chief Hegseth, which said that based on everything we've seen, and quote, "I've seen it all, our bombing campaign obliterated Iran's ability to create nuclear weapons." So he is standing by that assessment that he made publicly over the weekend. But now we're seeing that the initial intelligence assessment, at least, is proving to be at odds with his characterization.
Wow. So, Selena, as you heard Louis say, SecDef standing by his statement. What are we hearing from the White House? Yeah, well, first of all, this is in stark contrast to what we've heard from the president in the White House saying that Iran's nuclear program has been, quote, obliterated. But today, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, in response to her reporting and from CNN, she is blasting it, saying that this is a result of, quote, low-level loser leakers. And let me just read to you part of her statement. She says, quote, "This assessment and the leak is a clear attempt to demean President Trump and discredit the brave fighter pilots who conducted a perfectly executed mission to obliterate Iran's nuclear program. Everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their targets. Total obliteration." But again, at least according to this initial report, and the caveat here is that this can change as more intelligence assessments come out, which is highly classified. This report says that the U.S. believes, based on this early report, that significant damage was done, but that was mostly to the above ground structures, not to the ones deep underground. And according to one person, the enriched uranium was not destroyed and the centrifuges are largely intact. So there have been questions ever since the U.S. strikes about just how severe the damage was. Was Iran able to move some of that enriched uranium and those centrifuges out of those sites, knowing that those U.S. attacks were coming? And also the bigger question of, did these U.S. strikes actually convince Iran to drop their nuclear ambitions, or did it in fact give them further reason to continue to pursue their nuclear ambitions moving into the future? Yeah, adding fuel to the fire there, so to speak. And in the meantime, Marcus, we're talking about this ceasefire. What do we know about the ceasefire out right now? And is this something that Israel wanted in the first place?
Kana, the ceasefire is still holding, albeit fragile. It is still in place. In the lead up to the phased start to this ceasefire, there were heavy airstrikes on both sides. In fact, the air raid sirens sounded numerous times today here in Tel Aviv and across Israel. But since the ceasefire went into place, there have been no reports of any other airstrikes by either side, and that is encouraging news to so many across the region. In terms of what Israel wanted, there's every indication that the IDF, the Israeli government, wanted to move forward with hitting a number of other targets in Iran. But there's some indication that in terms of the public here, people, everyday people, they are glad this is over, Kana. And certainly with the restrictions being lifted, people are able to go back to their regular lives. That is something that they were hoping to do in the midst of really an uncertain time and a very stressful time for people not only here in Israel, of course, but across the Middle East.
Absolutely, incredibly tense. And so, Louis, how is the Pentagon responding to this ceasefire? The president saying it's been violated. But also, as he's saying that, what's the plan here for the United States? Is it to remain in a defensive posture in the region, especially if there's more strikes?
Everything in order. Yeah.
No, that's exactly right, Kana. The United States is maintaining that defensive posture throughout the region for its U.S. military personnel and facilities. We saw overnight that there were some drones that were launched towards some U.S. and Iraqi bases inside of Iraq, but they didn't cause any damage, and almost all of them were knocked down by defensive measures, and no one has taken claim or responsibility for those attacks. But it kind of goes to the whole notion here that you have all these U.S. forces in the region who are on a level of high alert in case something does happen. We saw it happen yesterday when Iran launched those more than a dozen missiles towards that U.S. airbase in Qatar. And I think the posture here is going to remain defensive and also to be a deterrent in case this conflict continues. But they're looking carefully to see how this ceasefire holds. And in the meantime, they're maintaining that defensive posture.
And so as they do that, Selena, you're again with the president at this NATO summit here. It sounds like he also spoke with Netanyahu as well earlier. Do we have a readout of that? What more is the president saying?
Yeah, so we learned from sources that the president was exceptionally firm with Netanyahu about what it's going to take to have this ceasefire sustained into the future. The source also tells us that Netanyahu basically got the message. He understands the severity of the situation and the concerns from President Trump. But the sources did not tell us that Israel had committed to holding back and stopping their attacks on Iran. So clearly some strain here in this relationship. President Trump making his fury at Israel very, very clear this morning, saying that these two countries have been fighting so hard for so long that they don't know what the bleep they're doing. And as the president lands here in NATO, he's beginning his meetings with NATO leaders. This is certainly going to loom large over the summit. Remember, the European leaders, some of them had met with Iran's foreign minister before the U.S. strikes began, urging Iran to come back to the negotiating table to meet with the U.S., urging for de-escalation and diplomacy.
All right, Marcus, Selena, and Louis, our thanks to all of you. Also, the death toll rising now from a massive new Russian attack in eastern Ukraine. There's video circulating online, and it shows a large mushroom cloud rising from the scene you see there. There's also video showing the aftermath of the track. It's along a train route in Dnipro. Local officials are now saying that 17 people were killed, 279 others injured, and that includes more than 24 children. ABC News foreign correspondent Patrick Regal is tracking the latest for us from London. So, first of all, Patrick, what more are we learning about this attack?
Hi, Kenny. I mean, this is a particularly deadly Russian attack for civilians. As you say, at least 17 people killed now, according to local authorities, and nearly 280 injured. This attack hit the southern city of Dnipro, one of Ukraine's biggest cities. It hit one of the strikes hit close to a passenger train. We see these terrible images of blood-stained carriages. We also see videos circulating showing children being treated by paramedics. But this, in general, we've seen in the past few weeks an intensification of these sorts of attacks. Just yesterday, or 2 days ago, I should say, a Russian attack on Kyiv killed nearly a dozen people. In general, most experts believe that as the peace talks have faded and as President Trump has seemed to lose interest and turn the U.S. away from this conflict, we've seen Russia step up the attacks on indiscriminate attacks on residential areas, with the Kremlin hoping that it can put more pressure on Ukraine that way, Kana.
Well, we know the president is meeting with European leaders at that NATO summit, as Selena just mentioned. Any more progress on peace talks here, Russia and Ukraine-wise?
Yeah, Ken, as you say, President Trump is obviously at NATO right now, and of course Ukraine will be at top of the agenda there. And President Zelensky is already also in the Netherlands, and it's expected that he will likely meet with President Trump. President Trump on Air Force One told reporters that he would, quote, probably meet with Zelensky, but obviously showing little enthusiasm for that, and also giving little indication that he intends now to start putting more pressure on Russia. And in general, I think European countries are very concerned about getting through this summit and not highlighting the big divisions between themselves and the US under President Trump. Obviously, he's been pushing them to reach this target of 5% defense spending of GDP. We've heard today he actually released an unusual text message from the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, where he praised President Trump, saying that all the countries would get there and that this was a big win for President Trump. That message is being interpreted by many observers as a pretty crude attempt to persuade President Trump that this summit is going to be positive for him. But clearly now we'll wait to see how it actually all comes out and what this meeting with Zelensky looks like when it happens, Kenneth.
All right, we certainly will. Patrick, thanks to you. Also, a life-threatening heat wave across much of the United States expected to shatter records today and peak. More than 150 million Americans are on high alert now from Texas to Maine. Of course, this is the day after the heat index in New York City reached 106 degrees. This is the highest area in 4 years that they've seen. New Yorkers are being asked to conserve electricity right now. Amtrak imposing heat-related speed restrictions in the Northeast after a train lost power and then had to be evacuated inside a tunnel in Baltimore yesterday. Meteorologist Kevin Roth from our Houston station KTRK is tracking the latest. I know you're no stranger to heat in Texas, but another record-setting day with this oppressive heat. So what are you looking at temperature-wise right now?
Yeah, Kana, we are shattering records across the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. We're seeing temperatures that have stood records for over 100 years. Those are falling, and one graphic really tells you just how widespread this heat is. Look at all of the heat advisories you're seeing throughout the country here, up and down the Mississippi River here, through the Midwest, and of course, all along the eastern seaboard. That 95 corridor absolutely baking right now. Anywhere in pink, that is an extreme heat warning, and that's where you've got feels like temperatures between 105 to 110. That is dangerous heat. Heat is the #1 weather-related killer, more than tornadoes or hurricanes. You need to be prepared. You need to be ready for that heat, and right now is the peak of that heat as well. Look at some of these current temperatures. This is what we're seeing in Boston, 101 degrees. That breaks the all-time high temperature record in June for Boston. That record has stood for over 100 years. You look at New York, it's 98 degrees currently. Philly, 100. D.C., 97. Up and down the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, it's the heat and the humidity. And when you've got that humidity in place, temperatures don't fall very efficiently overnight. And that means even as you're waking up tomorrow morning, still feeling steamy. These are temperatures at 8 a.m. on the East Coast. Feels like 88 in New York, feels like 92 in Philly, feels like 91 in D.C. Of course, it will be hot again tomorrow, starting off very steamy. Feels like temperatures by the afternoon in New York right around 100 degrees, between 105 and 110 through areas like Philly and D.C. The good news is it is a little bit cooler tomorrow, but it is still dangerously hot.
Oh, okay, just a little bit. I guess we'll have to take it, Kevin. Our thanks to you, as always. And voters are now headed to the polls today for the high-stakes Democratic primary in the race for mayor of New York City. And among the leading candidates here, Andrew Cuomo, looking to wage a bit of a comeback. This is nearly 5 years after he resigned as New York's governor in response to allegations of sexual harassment and inappropriate conduct. He's facing some tough competition, though, from Democratic Socialist State Assembly member Zohan Mamdani, whose proposals include city-run grocery stores. New York City is also using ranked choice voting for this primary, asking voters to rank the candidates in order of preference. Also, incumbent Mayor Eric Adams is running as an independent and will face off against the winner of that. All right, coming up next year, both sides rest their case in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. What's next for the disgraced music mogul after dozens of witnesses told tales of drugs, sex, and violence during the 6 weeks of testimony? Also ahead, a possible syringe attack at a festival in France, but we're learning about the assailants and the victims who were targeted.
With Smart Plus campaigns, we went from 250,000 downloads to over 1 million downloads in less than a year.
We've generated over 100,000 leads, which has converted into over 40,000 sales for our pet insurance policies.
Get started today with TikTok Smart Plus ads.
More Americans choose ABC News, America's #1 news source.
Come on. Come on. Come on now.
You have no idea what to expect now.
Come on, man.
Disney and Pixar's Elio is Pixar's best original since Coco. Full of laughs and heart.
We should adjust your gravity. Oh, no, I'm fine. Gravity.
Disney and Pixar's Elio. Rated PG. Now play.
What's good to watch? Read? Where can I get a great deal on what I'm just dying to buy? It's all right here. GMA Life. All the exclusive and fuzziest celebrity good stuff. Deals and steals with amazing savings and the coolest lifestyle tips from Good Morning America.
I love that so much.
GMA Life. Streaming weekends on ABC News Live. Your weekend just got a little better with GMA Life.
Hello there. I'm Ryan Reynolds. I want to introduce you to nature's benchwarmers.
Man, it's hot.
Get ready for the underdogs. You tell them, Green Day. These guys. Now it's their time to shine. Strap in for the ride, my friends. Gross. It's the music event of summer, CMA Fest, with one-of-a-kind collaborations featuring Brooks and Dunn and Lainey Wilson, Shabuzi and Jellyroll, and Bailey Zimmerman and Big X The Plug. Are you guys ready to party? CMA Fest, presented by SoFi, Thursday, June 26th on ABC.
All right, welcome back to ABC News Live Reports. Both sides resting their case in the sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy trial against hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs. This is after 28 days of testimony from nearly 36 witnesses, including ex-girlfriends, former employees, male escorts, and rapper Kid Cudi. Prosecutors believe they have enough evidence to convince the jury to convict him. Today, Combs' defense team examining years of text messages from his ex-girlfriend Jane, arguing that she played a significant role in the planning of these alleged freak-offs. But Combs has pleaded not guilty to all charges and denies any wrongdoing. Again, a warning for our viewers here, because this story may contain accounts, descriptions, and visual content of actual or alleged events that some may find disturbing. And so for more on this, I want to bring in ABC News legal contributor and trial attorney Brian Buckmeyer. Brian, I have to tell you, I had to read the email a couple of times here to realize the defense is actually resting here, not even calling a single witness just hours after the prosecution rested. Were you as surprised as I was by that?
Take some getting used to.
I was shocked. I thought at the very least they would have put on a witness that could have testified to the sex trauma as an expert, and this might have been a battle of the experts, so to speak, at least when it came to the testimony that came from Cassie and Jane. But as you pointed out, they decided no, not to put on any witnesses. Instead, just to read a few pieces of information into the record as evidence and then rest themselves. Clearly, they believe that through cross-examination, they've raised enough reasonable doubt in this case.
Oh, and then to also ask for an acquittal.
Yeah, so it's what's called in federal court a Rule 29 or a motion for a judgment of acquittal, and that's very standard. It happens in every case, and more likely than not, I would say probably even more than that, like 99% of the time, the defense attorney loses that argument. But it's very telling that Alexandra Shapiro, the appellate attorney expert of this group of attorneys, made the arguments, because I think it's more of an issue of you might lose the battle, but you hope to win the war. You are preserving issues and making the argument that Sean Combs should be found not guilty because, as the standard suggests, in the light most favorable to the prosecution, even then they have failed to prove this case. But it did give us a glimpse in terms of the defense's arguments as to why they believe these allegations are not made out by the government.
Interesting. I also want to bring in Rena Roy, who's outside court on a very, very hot New York City day. Rena, thank you for being here with us. And really, this quick summation that Brian just gave there also highlights how important cross-examination is during this witness testimony. We really saw the defense making a tough argument here that, in their opinion, Jane wasn't always being coerced. In fact, sometimes they argue she organized these so-called freak-offs.
Yeah, Kana, that's absolutely right. This was a painstaking, almost tedious cross-examination. The defense really went much longer than we expected them to with this Homeland Security special agent. And they brought up a slew of text messages between Sean Diddy Combs and his ex-girlfriend Jane, showing that she did, in fact, arrange some of those encounters with those male escorts, sending one named Cabral flight information saying she was excited to see him, also calling one night they had together, quote, one for the books. The defense really trying to show and paint Jane as a willing participant here in those encounters, in those so-called hotel nights.
So it sounds like closing arguments will be Thursday. Brian, you think the government's made a case here for a criminal enterprise led by Diddy?
Oh, I think they made a case, but Alexander Shapiro's arguments at that motion for acquittal definitely made me think there could be something for both sides to argue. And this is what I mean by what Sean Combs, I think it's pretty clear, was involved in some level of criminality, whether it be the arson or something to that effect of the predicate charges. The defense made the argument that there was no actual meeting of the minds. That while Christina Coram and people like D-Rock, former chief of staff and security guard, were mentioned throughout this trial, much of the time Sean Combs either kept information from them, or when Sean Combs was accused of violently beating Cassie, Cassie would go to D-Rock for protection. And the argument is conspired with these people if he's hiding information from them and if they're doing acts against that of the criminal enterprise. It was an interesting argument, but ultimately, in my opinion, doesn't matter. The 12 people deciding this case, it's going to be in their hands come either Friday or even potentially Monday after closing arguments.
Wow, it is coming up fast. All right, Rena and Brian, our thanks to both of you. And make sure that you catch our new ABC News Live daily show on the trial called The Burden of Proof in the case against Diddy. It airs nightly at 5:30 p.m. And for even more, tune in to Brian's podcast, Bad Rap, the case against Diddy. You can get that wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, coming up next here, an alleged syringe attack at a French music festival. More than 140 people say they were pricked. What we're learning about the suspects and what may have been inside those syringes. Celebrating the new NBA champs, the Thunder parading through the streets of Oklahoma City, how basketball's biggest stars putting on quite a show for their fans.
If you're a fan, what you'll see in the next minutes, hours, days to follow may convince you you've gone to sports heaven.
Hello there, I'm Ryan Reynolds. I want to introduce you to nature's benchwarmers. Get ready for the underdogs. You tell them, Green Day. Now it's Billis to shine. Wrap in for the ride, my friend. Yes.
It's the Disneyland Resort 70th celebration, and it's not a celebration without you. With all the sights and laughter and fun, everyone's excited. Everyone's excited. Come join this once-in-a-lifetime celebration at the happiest place on Earth, only for a limited time. Visit Disneyland.com/70 ticket offer for details.
The news never stops. We are here in Israel, a nation at war.
It appeared to be gunfire at the former president rushed off the stage. Her family ravaging the coastline of Florida. It's moving really fast, streaming across the state, and that's why the ABC News Live never stops.
Taking you to the center of the story. As news breaks live.
We hear the small arms fire around it. We're right to the border between Ukraine and Russia.
ABC News Live is there for you at the start of your day all morning. ABC News Live, right there, as events unfold across the day. ABC News Live, breaking down the day's top stories.
But that's sweet seconds. Years to life.
ABC News Live on going wherever the story is. Are you going to build it back up? And ABC News Live, lighting up the weekend.
With breaking news and all the latest on everyone. It's the news never stops.
It's the music event of CNA Fest. Canvas produced by Blake Shelton, Megan Maloney, Keith Bergen, Kelsey Ballerini, and more. You can only miss CNA Fest presented by SoFi, Tuesday, June 26th on ABC. Mr. Sex Trail Lies. Yeah, the greatest true crime stories from 25 nights at 9.
Well, thank you for sharing with us. Tom Airlines are calling up this story with police who are saying that 14 suspects have been arrested after nearly 150 people were allegedly jabbed with needles. It was at a music festival in France. Most of the victims were women. They reported feeling symptoms like hot flashes, dizziness, some even lost consciousness. They also had visible bruising on their skin. And French police are now warning festival goers to be vigilant, to seek help if they feel symptoms. Investigators are also saying it's still not clear if substances have been detected in the blood samples taken from those victims. Also, the Greek island of Chios under a state of emergency due to wildfires. Nearly 200 wildfires have been sent to battle those flames. They're urging nearby villages to evacuate. The fire started over the weekend. It continued to spread through forests and agricultural land. The Greek Climate Crisis and Civil Protection Minister is saying that authorities are investigating the possibility of those fires being an organized criminal act. Right, thousands of fans in Oklahoma City and fans of the Oklahoma City Thunder clearly taking the most serious to celebrate the team's first ever NBA championship. The Thunder clinching the title after winning a 7-game thriller against the Indiana Pacers. OKC stars parading through the city to commemorate the win as fans showered them with support and a little champagne. The team already, by the way, a top pick to repeat as champs next season. But the news never stops here. You can find us anywhere you stream live news, and if you're on the go, we're on the ABC News app and abcnews.com as well. I'm Kate Whitworth. Thank you for streaming with us. There's more news straight ahead.
My oldest daughter, Camilla, she came out fighting 2 days ago. She had to have a heart surgery. So she's been on 5 different medications. Me and the pharmacist got so tired. She's same that extra $300 a month. And how you do the math, the money we're able to save with using GoodRx, we're able to do all these extra activities. She can hit hard too for a little skinny thing. So it puts less stress on our household, and it puts less stress on our pockets.
It feels like the last it's an invitation to come together and love you more. And with all you always be destiny, your legend begins. The day to embrace you. Vacation at sea. Sailing through November 2025. I love the idea of summer. It's Disney. 30 Days of Disney. Drinks that eat. You're so cute. Excuse me? What? Be a part of our life. With so much Disney, it feels like you're on vacation. In summer! I'm Italian. Don't you dare. 30 Days of Disney. Watch all June on Freeform.
All right, top headlines on ABC News Live. President Trump lashing out, saying both Israel and Iran violated a ceasefire just hours after it was put into place. We have the latest for you on the tensions in the region as we learn more about the scope of damage to Tehran's nuclear program. Plus, triple-digit temperatures hit parts of the country as an extreme heat wave grips the East Coast. We're forecasting the record heat and how long it's expected to hang around. Also, both the prosecution and the defense rest in a sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Closing arguments are expected Thursday as the rap mogul denies all allegations. An ABC News Live report starts right now. Campbell here in Los Angeles. We begin now with diplomatic breakdown in the Middle East. President Trump accusing Israel and Iran of violating a ceasefire just hours after it went into effect. The president slamming both nations for not following the deal he helped broker after days of strikes and fighting in the region. Trump's using some strong language earlier, telling our Rachel Scott he's not happy with either side.
I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.
So hours after Trump announced that so-called 12-day war would soon be over, there were reports of explosions coming in. Both Israel and Iran blaming each other for breaking the agreement. Israel claiming it only responded to a barrage of missiles launched by Tehran before the ceasefire went into effect. But Iran's state-run media denying any violation, saying the country's president won't violate the ceasefire unless Israel does. Israel's defense minister echoing that same sentiment earlier today. All of this coming after yesterday's Iranian missile attack on a U.S. airbase in Qatar, just 2 days after the U.S. struck 3 nuclear sites in Iran. Now, the president had touted monumental damage done to all nuclear sites in Iran, but sources are now telling ABC News that early intelligence finds the U.S. strikes only set Iran's nuclear program back by months. So we're bringing our ABC News foreign correspondent Marcus Moore. He's in Tel Aviv for us. ABC News senior White House correspondent Selena Wang is in the Netherlands there, and ABC News senior Pentagon reporter Louis Martinez. So first of all, Louis, what are you hearing from sources on this early intelligence assessment here? How much damage do they really think was done?
Shana, this was an intelligence assessment that was classified, that was produced by the Defense Intelligence Agency and U.S. Central Command. Their analysis, and again, it's an early assessment, is that essentially Iran's nuclear program was not destroyed, as has been characterized by President Trump and by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Instead, they say that while significant damage was put together on these 3 nuclear sites that were targeted over the weekend, it only set back Iran's nuclear program by a few months. So this is different than the language, obviously, that we're hearing from both President Trump and Defense Secretary Hegseth. And earlier today, we did get a response from Defense Secretary Hegseth. I'm going to read you what he said. He said, based on everything I've seen, and I've seen it all, our bombing campaign obliterated Iran's ability to create nuclear weapons. And he said our bombs hit exactly the right spot at each target and worked perfectly. So, and he continues to use the term that obliteration for the characterization of what happened to Iran's nuclear program.
Right, and Selena, it sounds like the SecDef is also trying to make the argument here that anyone saying otherwise is trying to undermine the president. You're traveling with the president at the NATO summit there in the Netherlands. What more are we hearing from the White House on this?
Yeah, I mean, look, the White House is really downplaying this assessment, with one official telling me that this assessment did not reach the highest levels of the Department of Defense. But as Louis was mentioning, this really contrasts not just with what Secretary of Defense Hegseth has been saying, but also what the president himself has been saying, claiming that the U.S. strikes completely obliterated Iran's nuclear program. Now, today, the press secretary is out with a scathing statement saying that this assessment is the result of a leak from a, quote, low-level loser, saying, and I'm just going to read this to you, Kana, quote, the assessment in the leak is a clear attempt to demean President Trump and discredit the brave fighter pilots who conducted a perfectly executed mission to obliterate Iran's nuclear program. Everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their targets. Total obliteration. But this does come, Kane, as there's been questions about whether these U.S. strikes actually accomplished in ending Iran's ambitions to build a nuclear weapon, or if it only further incentivized them to do so.
Right, and ambitions is one thing, capability is another. And while this is clearly being debated here, Louis, it also sounds like Iranian officials are saying the country is going to stop complying with international inspectors. This is when it comes to their nuclear activities. What's the process there, the enforcement possible?
Well, what you have is a process from the International Atomic Energy Association, and what they do, the IAEA, they have inspectors who go and visit some of the locations under international agreements with Iran. So the inspectors have visited some of these facilities that were actually struck over the weekend, and they are the ones that check and make sure that the facility is working and that the Iranians are doing what they say they are doing. And so when they pull out of a system like that, then that makes it much harder for the world, essentially, to determine international organizations, security organizations, to determine what exactly is Iran doing. Sure, there's going to be intelligence that's going to determine, we'll probably get some information, but what we've seen is that the IAEA, through its inspection regimen, is able to have good views of exactly what it is that Iran is doing. And remember, there's always been this disconnect. Israel has said that Iran is working towards getting a nuclear weapon, and the United States has made this decision for years now. The assessment has been that Iran's senior political leadership has not made a decision to pursue nuclear weapons. So there's always been this disconnect. And one of the things that always been looked at is how the IAEA measures the levels of enrichment.
What's the problem now?
That Iran claims that they're making.
Just believe me, this motherfucker all about making my life a hell. He ain't got no needs.
Marcus, in the meantime, is saying the ceasefire marks the beginning of a new phase of the conflict.
Got one purpose, and that's to make my life a living hell. He ain't got nothing he need. They don't want a goddamn thing. They getting paid.
Yeah, that's right, Kenna.
Y'all gonna get the black mold part of it.
Israeli officials believe they have been successful in not only
the son of a bitch
Iran's nuclear capabilities.
Y'all, they making money, bitch. You want a reason?
We heard from Israeli officials tonight saying that they had taken out some 20,000 of those missiles. And
y'all get the motherfucking black mobile from that shit.
Beyond, towards the mid and the long term, there is a sense that Israeli officials are hoping that, say, there is a new
be still knocking in the roof.
That
shit. Y'all get the black mold and the Zika assessment.
Continue with
when that motherfucker get through digging in the roof, and y'all hear him and shit. I don't care if these nigga lovers hear me.
That deal would allow them the monitoring to continue and to prevent them from doing that. But in addition to that, Kana, the Israelis have said that if they see that there are steps towards Iran trying to develop a weapon, they will strike them again.
All right, Marcus, Selena, and Louis, thanks to all of you. For more, I want to bring in our former Senior Director of Counterterrorism from the National Security Council, Javed Ali. A lot to go over. Thank you for being with us. Let's start with the ceasefire. Do you agree with the president that this war here would be over if this ceasefire essentially holds through tomorrow?
Hi, Kenna. Nice to be with you as always. And we're going to have to just wait and see. And there hasn't been, at least since this morning's remarks from President Trump after he was taking off to the NATO summit, there doesn't appear to be any further cycle of attacks between Iran and Israel. But as the last segment just indicated, Israel probably reserves the right to break the ceasefire, or thinks they reserve the right to break the ceasefire and attack Iran again if they see these operational indicators of a threat directed against them. So that's something that's very tenuous. And even going back to the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas for the past 18 months and the conflict with Israel and Hezbollah from last fall,